Eccentric, artist, poet, cellar master, and the jovial champion of surprise and joy in life. I take the road to Haute Cabriére in the Franschhoek Valley to explore the landscape of Achim von Arnim. In samewerking met Wynlegendes Media, deel van die Windpro-familie.
You see, if you haven't got a philosophy, you haven't got a direction.
Exactly, yeah. So what was your philosophy?
Well, it started with my mum at Sil, True Marriage of Food and Wine, but actually what kicked me off was Hadrian, you know, the famous Roman emperor, who said, wine initiates us into the volcanic mysteries of the soil and its hidden mineral riches.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I was disciplined in the cellar by Carl Werner, who I had ran an apprenticeship in a European fashion. And then this Hadrian came along and my career evolved and I ended up in Boschendal, where Hermann Hanekom was in charge of the vineyards and I was in charge of the cellar. And we just met each other, and instead of just looking after the vineyards, we became colleagues, mates, and we realized that quality wine has an origin. You don't make wine. I get into so much trouble saying you don't make wine, you know, and because it is viticulture in vino veritas, this energy that. And culture is the ability to realize the full potential of a situation. So if you don't treat it really, you know, you're trying to bluff somebody.
Yeah.
It's like tasting wine. The true value of tasting wine is to share wine intimately with somebody who loves wine as much as you do. Otherwise, it's drinking wine and getting drunk or misusing it.
Yeah.
And the true marriage of food and wine, I emphasize or enjoy the aftertaste of a wine. If you look at a wine, you see its color, its evolution, it's giving its clarity. If it's brown, it's too matured, and then you smell the wine, and slowly these things. But if you just pick up a glass of wine, you're not halfway there, and so you share this wine, you look at it, you smell it, and the bouquet must be inviting. If enticing. If it doesn't entice you, you know, you don't want to go any further. Then you taste the wine. But I love the aftertaste of a wine, which is a combination of the bouquet, the flavors. But if it doesn't linger on the palate, you can't enjoy wine with food, because the wine must linger on the palate long enough to be able to dance with the food, to complement each other,
that's
to
gorgeous.
Be excited about. I get excited about, the only thing I don't get excited about is looking myself in the mirror. I'm always horrified. But so wine has been all these elements of looking after wines in a disciplined manner that Carl Werner taught me. I went to Geisenheim, met Dani de Wet there. We had too much fun. I mean, I can't even tell you half the stories because you'll edit them.
You're more than welcome. You can tell the stories. I spoke to Dani, and there was a morning where you were living in a lady's house, and she was also, I think she was also one of your lecturers, if I remember correctly.
She taught us about life.
Yes, I'm just going to say you woke up naked one morning. That's why I'm going to stop the story. But it was very funny. What you slept in was you slept in a gown. You said you took the blue blood.
I slept in nothing.
And nothing.
And she said, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this in my life. So it is that fun. Also, Donnie and I went to visit his uncle, who was an ambassador or consul in Portugal. And I'd met a girl called Esmeralda at a wine show, and she had a twitch in her eye, but I was convinced she was winking at me, and that she had taken a favor to me. So in any case, when we went to visit his uncle, I thought, well, let's pop in and just say hello to Esmeralda. And I had no idea what welcome I would receive.
Yeah.
So I went up, and the mother said, "You must stay for lunch." Now, Donnie had driven us there with a friend of us from Kuno, and of course, always being hungry because we had no money at all. I said, that would be a great idea. Anyway, 2 hours later, Donnie and them were still waiting in the car.
Oh, my word.
And they could. He said, we tried to drive off twice, but we said we couldn't. So our student days were so hectic and wonderful, and visited any wine festival. And that's where I met Hildegard, who was just about to fall off the bench because everybody wanted to sit next to her sister, who was a wine princess or something. They've got part of their culture.
Yeah.
And she was going to fall off the bench, and I said, "Don't worry, I'm here." And that's when it all started. 50 years later, we're still together.
Gorgeous. And it's amazing. I mean, she's a patron and a co-founder also of the farm.
She's worked in the vineyards.
Yeah.
She grew up, and she was, you see, in Europe, there were 4 children, and she was the more academic one. The others went into apprenticeship like I went in, and ended up remained in the vineyards, and all. So the one brother ran a wine laboratory. So these things all happen. You can't try and get everybody to university, but everybody must be able to contribute to society. And I think this is the interesting part about my career, was how I got more and more involved. That Herman's now running our vineyards here, and he loves the vineyards.
Yes.
He loves being in the vineyards. He's disciplined. And you have to be disciplined. And,
but I want to know, you honored me with a piece of artwork. What a massive honor! I can't wait to put it in the house.
You must send me where the picture.
I will definitely.
That's the ultimate thing for me to see that it's being enjoyed.
That's been placed. Yeah. But Achim, please tell me. I think a lot of. And you're not just a winemaker, and we want to talk about.
You mustn't say winemaker.
I want to talk about all cellar masters are winemakers, but not all winemakers cellar masters. Before we get to art.
Well, winemaker is showing no respect to our culture. Culture is the ability to realize the full potential of a situation. And if you think you can make wine in a stainless steel tank and the latest destalker, you've made a mistake. Because like I did with Herman, we looked at the vineyard and said, when are we going to pick it? What are we going to use this for? What's the range of wines? And it was like I painted painting, like this one I gave you here as well. You know, Einstein said art characterizes the irresistible urge of a true artist. It's an urge to paint something.
Yes.
And my paintings start off with this urge. And then as it evolves, it changes completely. That could have been a tree that developed into flowers, but as you go along. Yeah. And with wine, you've got the terroir, and you purchase the farm. That's the other thing about a winemaker. You pay him, and you've taken all the risk of buying the property, developing the cellar, and all these things. And he comes along if he's wise, if he's a cellar master. And the cellar master is somebody who's been through an apprenticeship, had a lot of fun, enjoys what he's doing, and it remains part of this whole thing. A winemaker marches in and sees if he can get a medal on the show. I remember the first time when we started working in Bosnau, I got all the medals and trophies and everything like it, but I came straight from the cellar in my sort of jeans and things, and I didn't have time to change. The other guys were in ties. And I saw N.C. Kroon, and he said, Achim, how can you look like a plaaswerker, you look like a farm worker. He said, but N.C., I am a farm worker. Yeah. And we laughed about it. But that was, that was the energy that we had. We just wanted to try and improve the wines of South Africa. Carl Werner had done it with culture yeast, cold fermentation. He was brilliant. He could taste 20 wines and arrange them on, he pushed wines, the glass away that he didn't like and pulled the glass.
Yeah.
So after just a second, and he never tasted without analysis, he could look down there and he saw which wines he preferred.
Yes. Yeah.
And the wines he preferred, he used for his drier blends. The ones that he didn't like, he used for the more semi-sweet, because wine is a triangle. The vertical is the acidity, the base is the extract alcohol, and the extract alcohol, and there's another one. Anyway, I can't think of it.
The fourth base, yeah.
But it's a triangle. So if you pick your grapes too
tannin.
early, it's thin and sharp.
Yeah.
If you pick them too late, it's flat.
Yes.
Now, what you want is an exciting bouquet. Then you want to have this fruit flavor and joy, and then you got to have the length of flavor at the end, so that you could enjoy it with food.
Achim, so you studied at Geisenheim. You started as a cellar master at Boschendal in 1970.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about your road to
not
Haute Cabriére.
Boschendal. I started at Columbus trying to sell equipment, and the sayers soon realized I couldn't sell anything, let alone ice to the Eskimos. I was useless. Then I went to distillers and learned from my mistakes.
Yeah.
Then Boschendal, and then Cabriere.
In 1970, you started at Boschendal, if I remember.
Yeah.
But the Blanc de Noir, please tell us about that and your decision to follow that road with Blanc de Noir. I know you worked with a Frenchman.
Yeah.
And from there, that was an important moment in South African wine history.
Yeah. You know, Blanc de Noir, first of all, being an artist or whatever I'm supposed to be, we looked at what were the grapes that Herman had on the farm. What could we use? When should we pick them? And we actually, not only where great wines were grown, the other important thing that we learned from Hadrian, sun, soil, vine, man. Those are the elements. If you think you can make wine, you're mistaken.
Yes.
If it's just the soil, it's the synergy of sun, soil, vine, man. So Herman had Shiraz, he had Pinotage, he had all these various cultivars which had to be picked at an ultimate ripeness. The ultimate ripeness of vines that are grown on a sandy soil, you can't go and get them up to 22 bulling. You must pick them at a lower sugar where the ripeness of the acidity and everything is in balance.
Yes.
So we looked at these grapes, and as I said, we had all the possible grapes in the world, and we said if we picked that Shiraz and that Pinotage or this Cab, we must pick it early. Not we want to, we must pick it early to produce an elegant wine. So elegance for me is very important. So we picked them at that, and we were even looking at producing a rosé, but in fermentation, it sort of moved in a direction where you didn't want to ferment it out completely. RS is the other part of the triangle. Sorry, it's the RS, the alcohol, and the acidity. That, as I said, it changes. So, okay, so we got this wine was in fermentation. It had an enormous amount of bouquet and fruit at a lower alcohol. Now we looked at this whole industry, and people had names like Lieberstein, Tassenberger, but you know, the wine industry was actually started by the Dutch East India Company, noticing that the Portuguese and Spanish sailors got less scurvy than their own. So Jan van Riebeck produced the first wine. But when the French Huguenots had to flee France, they said, here's an opportunity to use these vignerons, grant them property, because the Dutch don't give anything away unless they can benefit from it. So these Huguenot vintners came and were given land in Franschhoek. And they always named the properties, this is very interesting, after where they came from. Okay. It was like their tracing device, because if they caused nonsense, then Pierre Jourdan will send it back to France, into Cabriére. And so the wine industry started to combat scurvy. And then it became something that became what it is today. So that was the beginning of the whole business. And we learnt along the way. But Hammond and I formulated this, where great wines are grown. They're not made, they're grown. And then if they're treated with respect in the cellar, then you can achieve products like Blanc de Noir. Yes. It was brand new. Yes. There were sherries, ports and things like that. They started to produce drinkable white wines. I was involved with Flottenberg, now with Montpellier, there was Tuyong Gesels. It was all forming, and it was exceptionally exciting. Yeah. But Blanc de Noir came from picking those grapes at the right sugar, and we produced this Blanc de Noir. It was an alcohol of about 12.5 volume%. It had just a blush of color, close to a rosé, but enormous amount of fruit. And we used the French names like Cabriére, like Blanc de Noir, and Le Bouquet, but it was having fun, you know. I mean, yes. I can't speak French to save my life, but I'm a great strategist, and I take every opportunity. So we came across this word, Blanc de Noir, which hit the market. They just didn't know where it came from.
You might not be, as you say, a good salesman, but you understand marketing. That's one
of
the things you're very good at.
I'm very naughty. Okay.
But Donnie just said, you know, you understand how to market something. So I think that's, as you say, you saw what the market, you know, would respond to. Yeah, needed. Yeah.
And you know, the thing with Donnie now, and we have a very close relationship. He's actually part of the same Verbindung, same sort of club bond, or whatever in Germany.
He told me about this. It's actually a farmer's bond to a certain extent, but it was still when Germany existed of different states. Yes, yeah.
And I went to his farm, and he said, you know, he was one of the first few farmers that broke through and produced Chardonnay or planted Chardonnay. And he had all this Chardonnay, was going to call it the Wetzelhof Chardonnay. I said, Donnie, you know, the great vineyards of Europe, over Ambler-Hütte or La Tache, became famous because they were specific soils, and they just were always a continuity of quality. And then it's supply and demand. You keep them in small batches. Like he's got a wine called Limestone Chardonnay. Yes, Limestone Hill. It's such a beautiful word, you know, a name. Yes. So and then he had Bataillon and
Batelier.
Batelier. Yeah. And so, these were all these beginning stages as pioneers with no money. We had so much fun; it was frightening. Yes. And so I started the Blanc de Noir. We started to use the French names, but always out of respect. Yes. On Cabriére, where we specialize in Cap Classique, it started off as MCC, but now it's beautiful that the Society of Vignerons now call it Cap Classique, which is the re-fermentation of the wine. I don't have to tell you all this, but and Chardonnay. Style distinguishes the famous champagne houses of France. Chardonnay and Pinot Noir contribute to this style. Chardonnay, elegance; Pinot Noir, intensity and richness. How long do you keep it on the yeast? And the famous breakthrough, there are two of them. Come quickly, I'm tasting the stars, said Dom Perignon when he tasted. Now, Isn't that beautiful? I mean, you
Tasting
look
the
at the
stars, yeah.
stars
Yes.
in the sky, and we've not landed there. I don't think we should. It's just the bewilderment, the beauty of, you know, life is a
Yes.
big surprise. And
Yeah.
if you don't accept that, you don't have any surprises. So, yeah, so that, and I was going to call, I still got it in my mind, Cabriére Brut. And then I met the guy that sold me my Deux Chevaux, which is a little French car, which was similar to the German Volkswagen.
Yes.
And he said, who was this property granted to? I said, Pierre Jourdain. He said, fuck, this is the most wonderful name you could ever, might have to
Yes.
have it, but it was such an exciting thing.
Yeah.
So Pierre Jourdain, you know, and
It was the first then blend, if I can use that, or base for MCC Pinot Noir Chardonnay base
Pinot Noir,
in
yeah.
South Africa,
Yeah.
Chardonnay Pinot Noir. Frans Milan, as we know, yes.
was the first, and the beautiful story
Yes.
about Frans Milan, he or I was presenting the wines at a tasting, and I was talking about mousse, which is the French term for the bubbles that are created in this fermentation. And I can't, Hildegard can tell the story, but he said, maar dis moes lekker, you know. Now, like come quickly, it is a surprise, there's joy about this.
Yeah.
You know, if you can pump wine around, the analysis must be there to guide you. You know? Like Taquan on our estate, who's running, one thing he has listened to me about is the alcohols must go up to 14, 15, because you might win a trophy. But Carl Werner told me, if the guy doesn't order a second bottle of your wine, you're not going to be able to. So we try and keep our wines, white wines, at about 12 and a half.
Yeah.
The Tranquille, which is a still champagne, at about 10 and a half, 11.
I've had so many bottles of that Tranquille in my life.
Let's not go there.
Because it's a lighter wine. You sometimes are looking for something that's slightly lighter. You know, whether it's
lighter is not.
But
elegant.
Incorrect term.
Okay.
But less alcohol content. Rather put it that way.
Do you know where they came from? We've had students for the last 20 years. They all stayed with us. Like Carol Bourgeois helped us with the first Pinot Noir, and she said, Achim, this Pinot Noir is a red white wine. Don't get tannin and keep it fruity, elegant with the length of
the unwooded. Was it
was
the
it
first unwooded? Not the unwooded.
Unwooded came from somebody else.
Okay.
But the thing about the Tranquille, Frank Zenner, who is larger than life, and he loved eating. So after being with us for a week, he said, Achim, I like the South Africans. I love the food. And, he was eating more than he should have. And then he said, but one thing, I haven't found a wine that I can enjoy with my breakfast. I have never laughed so much. So I said, well, Frank, what do you do about this? He said, well, in the Champagne, we have a wine called Champagne Tranquille, which means the base wine that hasn't fermented for the second time in the bottle.
Yes.
So, well, Frankie boy, and he'd broken his knee, you know what you're going to do? You are going to sit at the press and you're going to produce us some Tranquille. Wonderful. Now, like the Blanc de Noir on Boschendal, we had this guy who'd eat a whole camembert cheese on his own if you gave him half the child. He was looking for a wine to have with his breakfast. And we produced a wine, Blanc de Noir was about 12 and a half, but this was 10 and a half to 11, because that's what you have to pick your champagne grapes at.
Yes.
So we produced this Tranquille, and it's such a lovely word.
Yes.
If you're nervous and you're in a rush, you have a glass of Tranquille, and everything starts becoming, you get tranquilized.
Yes, yeah.
Not hypnotized.
Calm.
Calm. So, in if you want to call it career, also with my art, is always this element of surprise.
Yes.
Surprise, and you can't organize a surprise.
Yes.
I've enjoyed Zen, and it's the now,
Yes.
the awareness. I have done karate for the last 50 years, and the real teacher of mine, I have two, is Paki Slopsha and Sensei Shinen. He was so aware through his training. And karate is a practicing thing over till it becomes a reaction. If
Yes.
you have to think, now I'm going to block,
Yes.
it's too late.
Yeah.
He can look at you and he actually knows what you're going to do.
Yes.
And Hildegard prepared fish for these boys once. And this is a beautiful story. So when you entertain, there's always one piece left. This Sensei Shinen was sitting next to her. And she looked at the big South Africans, bulky guys, and telling you who they were and all that. Little Shinen tends to be a little bit on the quiet side. So Hildegard thought, well, I don't have to offer this last piece of fish to this Jap yet, because thinking, he's small, he's had enough to eat.
Yeah.
And he looked us straight in the eyes and said, I'll have that last piece of fish.
Nice, nice.
It
The
is-
surprise of the
it's such
person.
it's a surprise.
Yes. So when last have you been surprised? Are you still surprised?
I'm
Because you
being
obviously
sur-
you connotated to life and living, having surprise in your life.
Well, I'm surprised I gave you this painting, and actually your response, sweetheart, is
wonderful.
surprise. You
Yes,
enjoyed
yeah,
it.
yeah.
You're not,
No,
I'll
wow.
see if I can hang it up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah.
You were pleasantly
Yes.
surprised. So
Very-
that's the last surprise.
It's
I
a,
made.
it's a, for, it's. I don't actually know how to respond. So
Well,
I'm going to take a picture.
hang it
of
up.
But yeah, it's real. What an honor.
Yeah.
But Achim,
Oh,
so
honor's going a little bit
it
different.
is an honor. It's an honor.
Yeah.
But if we talk about, we're talking a little bit more about career and the things that people connotate to you, that in a way defines you. And then I want to talk a little bit about your German heritage still as well,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. But
Yeah.
the not the last thing, but one of the most important things that also come to mind is your Pinot Noir Chardonnay
Yeah.
Pinot Noir
Well, that's-
wine.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not the trunk, but it feels like it's a bit similar. But I've had many of those too.
Yeah.
So
It's frightening.
it is, yeah. It's so drinkable. It's just a lovely, lovely wine. I mean, you look at this farm and you look at a day like today, a little bit windy, but open and just a gorgeous day, and you just want to sit and appreciate that kind of wine on a day like today with summer ahead of us. So why that blend?
You see, it's interesting. On Barchendal, we had vineyards that were very suitable to produce Blanc de Noir. It was predominantly, not Pinot Noir, Shiraz, Pinotage, but we blended, we picked these grapes very selectively of the soils that were suitable for a very fruity but low alcohol wine,
Yes.
but at 12 and a half. On Cabriére, we were the first estate to to concentrate on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. That's all we have on the farm, and
Yes.
we did that specifically for. I looked at the market, and the only place where we could afford to go to Cap Safonkel. France Milan, then we did it at Barchendal. We also produced the first Barchendal Cap Safonkel.
Okay.
And then I had to find a farm that I worked close enough to from Barchendal, because of being very naughty. I had my day in Barchendal, I had to go and do something on my own.
Yes.
Is that with Cap Safonkel, we could actually make a living out of it. So we had Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And the first vintage, I think it was 1994, which was the best vintage we've had with Pinot Noir. Our grapes on the farm ripened to produce a wine of 12.5 or so, a volume percent alcohol. And you have to produce a base wine for Cap Safonkel at 10.5, maximum 11 volume percent alcohol, because the wine ferments for the second time in the bottle. and creates 1.5 volume% alcohol.
Yes.
So if you've got a wine at 12 and it ferments in the bottle, it gets to 13.5.
Yes.
Now, let's have a gin and tonic rather, or something like that, but it just doesn't work.
Okay.
Because the bubbles bring the alcohol out and it's just not there. So I was sitting with this crop, no money, and we had to do something with it. And there was a lady in Kloofneck who had a restaurant, but connected to a cookery school connected to a restaurant. And she was daring enough, she didn't know me, she said, anybody that can produce a wine or present a wine that can match or pair off with my bouillabaisse,
yes.
I'll stand the lunch, you bring the wine.
Nice.
Now, from the tanks, I took this wine at 12.5 volume% alcohol, and I blended in the bottle basically, and I think, who's the guy? Well, there was Giles Webb, Alan Mullins, and various, we were a colleague of gangsters. We took this case along, not quite knowing what was going to happen. There was a surprise, or wait for it. And we drank that case of wine. She loved the wine. It went with the bouillabaisse. And it just took off, this Chardonnay Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
And, we also just called it Chardonnay Pinot Noir because it sounded so good. So
yes.
It was Cabriére or Haute Cabriére Chardonnay Pinot Noir. Like Blanc de Noir,
yes.
It worked.
Yes. Also,
now,
also a fruit, there's a lot
enormous
of fruit.
amount of fruit.
Yes.
Now, Blanc de Noir was more red wine driven than white wine. Here, the volumes on the farm were more Chardonnay than Pinot Noir. So this Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir worked out beautifully. And sometimes it's got a little bit of a blush sometimes, but we're just enjoying now the 2020 Chardonnay Pinot Noir.
Yes.
And Tacoan has picked this up, and he knows it mustn't be 13, it's 12.5.
Yes.
It's got a lovely fruit, not that we work on analysis, but it's not bone dried.
Yes.
It must be there for people to enjoy.
To enjoy, yes.
It goes with just about anything except a steak or something like that where you want a red one. But Blanc de Noir just took off.
Yes.
And it started with us having to produce
yes.
it. Herman on Boschendal, we had to use the grapes he
yes.
had, and it worked. But if you say, I'm going to make,
Doesn't
or
work
I'm
like
going to
that.
paint,
it has to flow from...
it must, an undesirable, irresistible urge. And how this enormous physics genius, Einstein, could go something and say that I believe in totally, is the irresistible urge, the creative art, not the guy. I don't like this modern art where they've cut a piece of canvas and some arsehole has actually taken and said, this is something special.
Yes.
Because it couldn't have happened to them. It wasn't, unless they like cutting canvas, which I don't.
It wasn't. It wasn't a need, and
it wasn't an urge. It was what can I do to look for attention?
Yes.
I promise you, none of my paintings. If you look in the calendar, this is our little Zoe.
Yes.
I mean, that changed, and I love giving girls necklaces. And
So, but why did you choose wine making? And I know that's the wrong term, but the wine industry and not art, for example. So where was that choice made? Because you are obviously, it feels like you're more an artist than you are a cellar master.
Sweetheart, I can show you a book on the art that I did in sub A and sub B. How this book has survived, I don't know.
Yes.
But my mother was an artist, and she was an unbelievably powerful woman. She used to be on the farm. She used to do our books, which were a disaster. There were a pile of invoices there. She used to present our wine. She should help label and bottle. She was dynamic, and she came from a brewing family. They actually had their own breweries at the end of Long Street. And I went to Castle Breweries in Newlands, who have got the hugest underground lake that, in the world. But I went there and I wanted to be an apprentice in the brewing like my mother. They were 5th generation, born in South Africa, always one German parent, one South Africa, just by coincidence.
Yes.
And then they weren't interested in apprentices because they didn't have this European heritage. Whereas, and then my mother, who worked in Silwood Kitchen, met Carl Werner. And Carl Werner literally revolutionized and he was very sensitive to sun, soul, vine, man. The grapes were picked warm, they arrived warm, the acidity was low, and they ended up as sherries, ports, and all that. But he made the breakthrough of not looking at looking at oxidation, keeping control of SO2, and I was very fortunate in my whole career to have that knowledge.
Yes.
He was a difficult guy. He ended up in California, and there's a huge monument, nearly like the Arc de Triomphe of him. That's what he did for California. But then my mother painted on tiles.
Also artistic then.
She was an artist in her way, and she did table decoration. She produced snails which she smuggled in from Europe, and people wouldn't eat them. I don't think she did frogs.
I would love to taste some of those. Love it, love the escargot.
But so she was an artist, and I must have, I've got the wonderful saying, which is naughty. It says, "It's all in the genes until you take them off."
Nice one, very nice one. But it's definitely something to do with genes, but also the environment in which you grow up in. Surely, I mean, your mother practiced that art around you. Also, I hear you've written 2 books on poetry.
Yeah,
so
I actually wanted, and I'll give you a book of my. It's a book called Naked, and there are a few naked girls in it. But the actuality was that I love the truth. I love reality of things because I find it so much more exciting than to go and twaddle off. This is Shakespeare. Shakespeare's a great guy. I mean, I love listening to him, and I love Faulty Towers. I like
English culture, literature.
Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson,
it's
John Cleese. And
my father. He was from a military family.
Yes.
Now he had
quite strict. He was very
enormously strict, but a lot of fun. Okay. He lost 1/3 of his nose with a at the age of 17, he was sent to the Russian front, and a hand grenade took his nose off, and he was always photographed for this side. He was a bit on the vain side. Yeah. And children always poke in their nose, so he said, "Don't do that because I would have lost my fingers." That's humor, that you're not trying to be funny. It's just part of this reality.
You also lost him at a young age. He died
quite young. I was sent off to boarding school, and basically in the week I went up to this boarding school that he died in hospital of stomach ulcers, which today they would have given him antibiotics or something. Yeah. But he actually died of something else. So it was quite a knock in, and with the German background, I mean, my life I've been very lucky, but also humorous. I mean, I inherited a pair of jackboots from my uncle who had walked back from Athens to Hamburg. And I had leather pants, the Germans wear leather pants, and they just get older and more greasy and shiny as you go along. And I was surprised that the English didn't really appreciate it.
No.
And I hadn't heard of nuns and Nazis and all the atrocities that the Germans had got through under this maniac. But I always believe that somebody is earning big bucks out of it. They say we declare war, but there must have been 2 years before that war was declared. Yes. Whether it was Hitler or Churchill or Roosevelt, they made a packet out of war.
Yeah.
And then the soldiers are given medals and cups and bands and bugles and all that. But you can't bullshit me because I love reality.
Yeah, yeah. Achim, we're sitting on Haute Cabriére. We're here in the tasting area and the restaurant's starting to bustle. They're getting ready for the lunch ahead. And you must, I don't know, maybe you get used to it, but you must stand on this farm and look at this beautiful view and think of everything that this farm has produced. And you guys are in the top 100 wineries in the world. You were selected on that list again.
And it's
great
not my
honor.
good looks.
Not your good looks, not your good looks. But do you stand and just sometimes think, wow, and you're amazed at what the farm was able to deliver?
It's a surprise. Now, this underground cellar was a quarry, and we bought the land below the road and above the road because this quarry had turned into a rubbish dump, and the municipality in Franschhoek at the time, it was an embarrassment for them.
Okay.
And then I looked at this.
The other side of the river, as I understand, yeah.
And I looked at this quarry and I said, you know, the Europeans build their cellars underground to protect the wines against the frost. This is culture, always realizing. But here I saw this quarry, being very naughty. I said, hang on, we could build a cellar underground and we could feed our grapes from the top into the cellar, because the less you go and manipulate these grapes, pips and grape skins bring harshness into the wine, whether you like it or not. And then you can take the harshness out of gelatin.
So you don't want the friction, you want it to flow naturally and not be forced in a direction.
Out of a ton of grapes, for quality wine, 500 to 600 liters per ton are quality. Otherwise, your phenol's, it's like biting into an apple.
Yes.
You look at that apple and it slowly turns brown. And avocado as well, it's called oxidation. Now, we don't have to go all scientific about it, but you want to regain that juice without it oxidizing. And then the fermentation is very reductive. It actually takes the sugar and ferments it out into alcohol and CO2. And then you have got to, it's like, once again, it's like the apple. You take it through, and sulfur is something on its own, it's a disaster. But if you use as little of it as possible, it actually protects the bouquet and the wine.
Yes.
And it is free and total as I do, but SO2 also, as you drink the wine, your stomach is full of acidity to digest food.
Yes.
All that SO2
it all fits beautifully together.
It's given off, so then your stomach and your body is actually inundated with this SO2 if the SO2 is too high.
Okay.
So Carl Werner taught us how, with analysis, you mustn't come to me and say, I don't need to know the analysis. And in actual fact, he had little Katzenberg with all the analysis. When he tasted his wine, he didn't do it according to the analysis, but he knew how he could protect that wine and take it into the marketplace. Yeah. And the wines with more tannin or too much acidity, he used to keep a little bit of that fruit residual sugar into the wine, because it's like a girl wearing a bit of makeup, you know, and it's the attraction that counts.
Yes, yeah.
So, it was my mother's brewing background. It was my father's military, regime going back to he's my great-grandfather or grandfather, used to do a handstand and walk on the table and salute the Kaiser. But I mean, I'm not a big one for this nobility and stuff. But
you are nobility. As I mentioned earlier, the blue blood. It's,
and good looking. So. Now that's it all helps. But we have had so much fun, and it's never trying to be funny. It's the situation just creates an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's when if I can sort of pat myself on the shoulder for any opportunity I love, like the grapes with Hermann and Boschendal, or Cabriére and underground cellar. I was always attracted to this opportunity.
You are going to sabrage for us, of course, today,
no,
a bit later, or not?
I'm going to sabrage with you.
Well, you know, okay, well, holding thumbs. But, really, but the concept of the sabrage, you are also...
I introduced this.
Exactly, linked to you like no other person in South Africa.
I did sabrage at a party in Franschhoek. Sue was one of the hostesses, and I hit the bottle 3 times or 4 times, and then I got the wine and the cork and everything spread in. And just a coincidence or opportunity, Graham de Villiers and I were in London trying to sell our wine. And we went to visit the London wine show. And it was totally by coincidence that we walked into this huge area in the champagne section. Not that we went there purposely. And there was a young girl, an attractive young girl, sabraging 1 bottle at the time. And I said, you know, I've done it in South Africa. And she said, the first thing I want to teach you, young man, it's not a party trick.
Yes. There you go.
I looked at surprise.
Yeah.
She said the French cavalry officers were offered a bottle of champagne before they mounted their steed. And they didn't, you know, they could not get the cork out of the bottle because in those days the champagne corks weren't waxed. So they took their saber and removed the top of the bottle. Now, again, the opportunity was when a young girl looked particularly good, I went up to them and said, would you like to do sabrage with me? And they were, of course, rather surprised. And I then held their hand, and we removed the top of the bottle traditionally. And then I used to knight them, you know, tapping them. And I'll do that with you today. You tap.
Being knighted today.
And in the Knight's Tale, Prince Edward, he said, I dub you.
Yes.
Now, this is a word that only is used when you knight somebody.
Yes.
And then I used to kiss them and say, this kiss you will remember for the rest of your life. I think they most probably forgot it that evening, but we had fun. Then we gave them a little cork, and I'm sure we could do that here. We give you the cork on a little plastic stand.
Oh, so you wonderful.
Would, you know,
it's something to treasure
but you see,
in the future.
If you go through life not respecting, it actually, or not listening, it's so important to listen.
Yeah.
And I've formulated one thing that I run our business with: discussion, decision, action, and control. You take one of those 4 elements away, and you find you actually go around in circles and you never get anywhere.
Yes.
But if you discuss something and somebody listens, you make a decision because you know, some people can't make decisions. Oh, I'll try that, you know.
Yeah.
And then the action is very important. You actually do. And then, if you've done anything, produce grapes, plant vines, you have to control.
Yes.
And that way, Hammond is enormously good. He will say, a hectare of ground, I plant so many vines, I'm going to trellis it this way, we're going to irrigate or not irrigate, we're going to pick them at that, it costs me so much, landowners, do I get my return on capital? All these things. If you're running a business and you don't do that thing, and then you employ a cellar master who actually has respect.
Yes.
If he's going to march into that cellar and produce a wine of 14 and 15, which are wines that today Tim Atkins and those boys look out because they come flying out of the glass and they say, that must be the best. But he's never drunk the wine. So that is the whole spectrum of this thing. Tasting a wine, all these things, pairing it off with food. The wine dances with the food.
Yes,
not one competing against it.
Exactly.
There's so many It's all based on respect.
So if we talk about the future, Achim, what do you see as the future of South African wine, and are there problems that you think that we're experiencing at the moment that we need to work on? Do we need more synergy between the wine farms and the brands? For example, do people need to work together more? I hear that a lot, that, you know, sometimes there's a lot of cohesion, but sometimes not. So what is your view of the future?
Well, I think as the Dutch East India they saw the French getting involved here, there must be a strategy. And we've made tremendous steps forward in technology, and people thought, well, the guy here with his famous cellar makes good wine.
Yes.
But it's in the last time, like Donny de Wet producing wines, Bataillon or Batelier, whatever, people are starting, and you can't blame the public to say, he's a winemaker, he won prizes, it must be the best, and wine of the month and all that. Yeah. But it's the guys that actually, like wines produced in Elgin or Himelanado, or the lot of packages that are coming, and the personality of is on its own, isn't it? But the personality that goes right back to the soil, those are the breakthroughs. Now, if you say, what's the future of South Africa? I think you should be exporting about 10, 20, up to 30. Might be, some people even export 50% of their crop.
Wine, yeah.
And they're up against a tremendous competition at the top.
Yes.
At the bottom, we can produce wine of a very high standard, yes, at a much more reasonable price.
Yes.
And you can see some of the vineyards aren't replanted because big American companies, people with lots of money, they go in there and they realize, you know, your vineyard takes 7 years to really come into production. How are you going to get that money back? So yeah, if it's not looked at realistically and economically, yes, and then to have a personality who can take it into the marketplace, like yeah, myself, like Günter Brösel and all these things, because they understood all this thing.
Yes.
But then behind this person, a wine must tell a story. Yeah. If the wine, no matter what category it's in, a wine like Blanc de Noir or Chardonnay is telling a story. People want, you know, if you meet somebody and they talk nonsense, or show, some people talk, I meet so many people, you don't get a word in because they're telling you, yeah, no, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Talk about themselves. You're supposed to be talking about yourself. No
but
worries.
It's so boring in there, because in actual fact, I want to be patted on the shoulder. But we have got such potential in South Africa. Yes. The different wine regions, like we went up the West Coast regions, actually with Hammond, and the beauty, but they were smaller states with, you know, supply and demand, and their wines are funny. And then even Sadi, I think it is, he serves or shows his red wines first, which I didn't particularly enjoy. They were too bulky, tannic, and then he served his white one.
Yeah.
And his white wines, they produce it out of Cinsault, out of cultivars that we don't use anymore. But yeah, they produce such wonderful wines, and people that are totally committed, yes, dedicated.
Yes.
Not doing this as a job or as just a finance, but actually doing things, committing their lives to producing, yes, exciting.
Yeah.
And I think we are, I think, very strong in comparison. Some wines are even exported in tanks and then bottled over there.
Yes.
So we have to find a way to utilize our potential.
Yeah.
And I think we stand a very good chance. We have got now Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, lots of quality cultivars, and yeah, I think we have a great potential, and we have great people.
Yes, yeah.
We've got people like Charles Back, you know, we've got Himelanada, great guys, Kevin Arnold. I must probably got the names wrong, but and you've got the Paul Kluwer in
Yes.
Elgin.
Yeah.
These personalities are there. Giles Webb of Tolima, and there are lots of, and they're all naughty. They're all fun. They all want to. They don't want to be famous. They became famous because people just. But if people have got a story, I met Charles Back, who produces a wonderful cheese, and you don't enjoy his company and his wines. It's always a synergy. It's always. It's never one element on its own. It doesn't work. But you've got to be able to introduce your wine.
Yes.
And the wine's got to tell a story that originates in the vineyard.
Wonderful.
And I've talked far too much, but that's what I'm not being paid.
No,
What
it's
you
beautiful.
want.
I want people to feel comfortable to talk about their life the way they choose. The idea is to learn about you, your life, what drove you, and this amazing legacy that you've created in terms of wine. So, but big on
Legacy
it.
always.
Yeah,
I don't want to end up like a
understand.
statue. I promise.
I understand, but we will always be drinking the wine. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, what it comes down to. But we're going to go Sabrage.
Yeah.
I'm a bit nervous. But before we go, Wynlegendes Media supports this project as well. They are 90 years old this year. Do you have a message for a birthday message for Wynlegendes Media?
In vino veritas. I think there's, well done. We're trying our best. So I think, once again, the media can't do with us, and we can't do without the media.
Yes.
We'd like to not be Tom, Dick, and Harry, but have people that love wine. We've got a guy in Durban called Dieter Zettler. I mean, Zettler. And he loves wine to such an extent, he phones me the whole time he's heard something or read something. But he's now retired, and he's still not tired about drinking wine. He always picks up things all over the place, and I must say he entertains me.
Wonderful.
So media is there because it also introduces wine. That's a good word. Introduces wine and the excitement of wine to a much larger.
To people,
Because South Africa used to be brandy and coke because they weren't quality wines. So people drank brandy and coke, like in the Karoo. I could tell you a story there that's frightening. But you're running out, or we're running.
No, it's fine.
But we went to the Karoo, and was one of the girls actually worked here, and Francine, who is enormously beautiful, and we gave some wine, and I've been in the industry now for 50 years, but we went up to, and the glass of wine there, of our own wine, we had to pay 20 rand a glass, which was a bit of a rip-off. In any case, I went there and we had a glass of red wine because it was getting a bit chilly, and we went again for the second glass. Now, red wine or Pinot Noir is usually served in a Burgundy glass, whereas the Cabernet Sauvignon is served or bottled in a Bordeaux glass, bottle. So I went there for the first glass, and the second round of glass, about 4 glasses, they poured the last out of the Burgundy. We've run out of this wine, and he just topped the glasses up with this other Bordeaux. I said, hang on, that's a different wine. He said, they won't taste the difference. And now, in 50 years, I'd never seen some barman blend a wine in front of me. So, but it was in the Karoo. The lamb was spoilt because they drank brandy and coke. But the lovely thing was, there was a lady sitting at the table, and she was as white as chalk. I mean, you couldn't get any whiter. And I went up to her and I said, wil u glasie wijn hê? Nee, ek drankie. So I was, but her friend said, ja, ek sal hier in 'n vat. So, but I convinced this lady that didn't drink, and she was about 50, 60, 70, she was getting on in age. I convinced her to drink a glass of wine, and this chalk white face slowly started to light up, pinkish sort of color, and she started to chat, and I said, I just hope she's not going to ask me to die.
You
Because I
fixed
can't
her, you
dance.
fixed her, you fixed her.
We
Oh,
fixed
that's so
it.
cool.
But it's a lovely story
Yeah.
because it was a different environment, and
Yes.
we were able to convince them that there was something special.
yeah.
Oh, left.
Yes, I'm right-handed. Yes.
Okay.
Yours is nice and heavy.
Okay, now we'll keep
Okay.
the cork on just until.
Okay.
Now, what you're trying to do, we're trying to hit there.
Yes.
So we go 1, 2, and then we take it off.
Okay, but you're going to do it with me.
Yeah, and the other thing
Woo,
this
here we
French
go.
lady taught me, just feel that.
Yes.
There's
There's a ridge.
That's
Yes.
a seam.
Yes.
Now, at the seam of the bottle, you.
Go straight on the seam
Okay,
of the
so
bottle.
you hold the bottle
Okay.
there. Nou, het jy ons op die ding is.
Okay.
Op.
That's a OPC.
1, 2.
Woo! Yay!
Now you've
Oh,
got to hold
that's
this
so cool.
in.
That's so cool. That's so
Now
cool.
don't touch the top of the bottle
course.
because it's razor sharp.
Yes.
I've got 6 stitches in my thumb.
my word.
I said, oh, that's a clean cut. Okay,
This is
now
just
play a
gorgeous.
glass for ons champagne
Classy.
glass.
That's a.
En
Ach,
nou,
dankie.
oh yes.
And we can celebrate.
En jy
That's
moet
it.
nou dit opneem.
My
Van
God.
COVID kan ek jou net op die kop. Okay, kry 'n glas.
That's a.
Come on,
Gezondheid,
sweetie, a big
gezondheid,
smile.
gezondheid. Gezondheid julle. Baie dankie.
Oppees dan.
Oh, lekker. In samewerking met Wynlegendes Media, deel van die Winpro familie wat hierdie jaar ook hulle 90ste verjaarsdag vier.